Hello there, I'm Zeyc, and today I wanted to talk about my predictions for the future timeline, which I'm pretty certain about are going to be right. And as you can see, we're currently at the beginning of the Pokemon timeline, mainly because going through the timeline with the two lines that I set up, in my opinion, is going to explain a bit more why I came to the conclusion of which game is going to be released. And for the beginning, I've taken the Japanese release dates, though as we go along, well, obviously the games are more released globally, except for side games, which often just come out in Japan first and eventually dribble over to us. Red and Blue came out, Yellow, Gold and Silver, Crystal, then Ruby and Sapphire. And here we come to the first remakes, which very simple. You know, they were made because any game after this point was incapable of trading with Ruby and Sapphire. So our remake timeline moves up a little bit over to there. And if we continue, obviously, Pokemon XD, Gale of Darkness, not as good as Colosseum, but still good. Diamond and Pearl, Platinum, and the second remakes. But with that, the timeline just slowly follows along the obvious path that it took beforehand. But now we have, obviously, Black and White 2, X and Y, and then we had our Gen 3 remakes, which, well, obviously, it's probably already pretty visible, pretty visible what I mean, but as you can see, the remakes seem to be following the overall Pokemon timeline. And I don't really have to show too much, you know. Next remakes, Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee, which remade the remakes, more or less. Then, obviously, Brilliant Diamond, Shining Pearl, which, at least for me, means the next remakes are going to be Let's Go Johto. And instead of just talking about it, let's move it up all the way to where we are right now. As you can see, I put some side games in the mix of when they released. If they're in the middle of these two, it usually means they came out early of the year to the right. Like Isle of Armor was early 2020, Crown Tundra was the usual game release date, which is usually November, I believe. And here again, Snap, Brilliant Diamond, Legends Arceus, Scarlet and Violet. They seem to be going for a not half yearly, but 2 games a year release with, well, one big game, usually, you know, a remake or a proper title, and then side games to, well, spice it up a little. And, well, I'll get rid of the timeline now, because now we go into the speculative part, which isn't too speculative because it's pretty obvious what they're gonna do, but there's still some, you know, guessing in which order they're gonna do, I guess. So for obviously the first year, my predictions, very simple. Scarlet and Violet DLC 1 in early 2023. Scarlet and Violet DLC 2 at the main slot for 2023. And honestly, I feel pretty confident saying there's going to be a side game. Obviously not another Legends game, because that just came out. I also don't think it's gonna be a Snap game. And I'm not sure if it's going to be a Mystery Dungeon game. We aren't really capable of guessing whether what kind of side game they're gonna release, because let's be honest, there are tons of them. Personally, I'd be happy if they do a Pokemon Conquest reboot, remake, whatever. But anyway, enough rambling, and here you see that I kind of have 3 timelines, well, possible timelines. The most upper one being, in my opinion, the most likely one by a big shot. The middle one being the second likely one by, well, small shot. And the lowest one basically being the least likely one with, obviously DLC 1 and 2. That's pretty obvious. Then for the second time I thought, maybe they're gonna, release Let's Go Johto, the remakes of the Gen 2 remakes. And, well, for the low probability timeline, DLC, Let's Go Johto. Why it's the lowest probability timeline, you'll see soon, because I eventually stopped going into it, because it's so low probability, and it's gonna become obvious later on. But let's go over to the next year, 2024. I'm extremely sure Let's Go Johto is, well, the highest chance for Let's Go Johto to come out is 2024. In a year where so far there doesn't seem to be anything. Then for the second most timeline, it's gonna be a side game. That side game that usually would have, well, in the most obvious timeline, would have come somewhere in here. Which, this is why I don't think this timeline is particularly that high of a probability, because it's basically just the remake and the side games being swapped, and I really don't think they're gonna go for that. But here is why I believe the lowest one is the least likeliest chance, because this is where I, did the hypothetical idea of 2 remakes during the cycle of the main games with Black and White remake. And if we quickly go over to the next year, here we have 2025 Gen 10 with, obviously Scarlet and Violet being Gen 9. They seem to be going for a 3-year, cycle. So here we have 3 years, Scarlet and Violet to Sword and Shield's 3 years, Sword and Shield to Sun and Moon is 3 years, Sun and Moon to X and Y is 3 years, X and Y to Black and White is 3 years, and only here, Diamond and Pearl to Black and White, it's 4 years, but that's, depending on how you see it, 12 to 16 years ago, where they, for the last time, actually had a, main game cycle of longer than 3 years. So I don't think that's very likely. Which then, obviously, I can't really predict what the game's gonna be called, where it's gonna be set. Like, far smarter people like Lockstin try to predict where the next generation was going to be set from Sword and Shield stuff, and they failed. So from just the trailer, it's pretty much impossible to predict where Gen 10 is gonna be set in. Then obviously, Gen 10 is going to be the main game of that year. Just period, for every timeline, because there's no probability that they're not gonna bring out Gen 10 at that year. There's only, as far as I see, there's only a small probability that they'll go to a 2-year cycle. But listen, they're already struggling with a 3-year cycle to make up quality game. If they decrease it anymore, well, either they have to hire more people, or the quality is going to decrease even more. Then we go to 2026. And obviously, just a side note, every year where there's nothing in this little slot being written, I'm pretty sure there's going to be a side game. Like the early 20s, the early part of the year, you know, January to March, April, is, like I said, I'm expecting them to always have 2 games per year, one of them being a side game, or maybe even 2. But no, writing it everywhere would probably be a bit more clunky and obscured. So I decided against it. I'll just saying it right now. And here we have what I believe is going to be what's going to happen. 2026, early in the year, we have Gen 10 DLC 1. End of the year, Gen 10 DLC 2. Same here, except for this timeline. Obviously, like I said, I predicted that the remakes are going to be released accompanying the second DLC of the main games. So here we have Black and White remake, and down here it seems like I've basically already stopped going for it, because 2 remakes between each main game is, while I certainly could see them doing this, the problem quickly comes from, well, not that many. Well, eventually they would run out of games to remake. For example, let's go back to a remake timeline. Always like I predicted, let's go Johto, then Black and White. Let's go over here for that. And in the lowest probability timeline, we'd now be, you know, Gen 10. Then X and Y remake. Let's go Johto. With that, we'd be at Gen 11. Then Sun and Moon remakes. The third Kanto remakes. With that, Gen 12. And Sword and Shield remakes, Diamond and Pearl remakes, and we'd be at Gen 13. And from there on, you know, it might actually be possible, but I find it so unlikely that I basically just ignore it for now. But with these predictions, let's continue with the main timelines of 1-2. Obviously, after the Gen 10 DLC, they're gonna make another remake, and the next in lines, Black and White. And for this, I actually predicted that in the early 2028, there might be a Legends Kyurem game. For this, I'm slightly torn, because while Legends Arceus is certainly a fun game, let's be honest here, it really is not. It's not a good game, okay? Let's be honest. It's not really a good game. By basic game development standards, the game would probably be a 3 out of 10. The main part that makes it actual fun compared to the previous games, in my opinion, is it's just such a breath of fresh air into the Pokemon license. And I'm not sure if they're gonna make another Legends game, considering that nearly everything from Legends Arceus is going to be used in the main games from nowwards on. Except probably the timeline, well, the new combat timeline where you can attack multiple turns in a row. I don't think it's too likely they'll put that into the main games, because, you know, they kinda like staying with their old, you know, formula. And with that, I feel the only reason for people to play, buy and play a Legends Arceus game is, well, first off, it's a Pokemon game. Come on, you're gonna buy it anyway, aren't you? The second one would be, the aesthetic of old-time Pokemon regions, which honestly I kind of like. I wish they didn't make it an isekai. And third, the timeline, combat timeline, the multi-turn thingies. Though personally, that was pretty boring after a while. It wasn't really... I'm not saying it's a bad idea, but it was a bad idea to take out abilities and simplify all the attacks for it. Because with that, you basically just showed that's something we could do, except of showing us that's what you could do with it. You didn't show us the full extent of where that could go, but enough of a tangent. Legends Kyurem, I personally would be interested in because, they've never shown us the true Kyurem before it split into Kyurem, Reshiram, and Zekrom. They so far only showed us fusions of 2 of them, which is why I'm curious if they're gonna do it. I hope they do it in the remake, but I'm not certain, which is why I wrote it in here. And obviously, second timeline, Black and White's gonna, come around the same time as DLC 2, and then I could see them do the Legends Kyurem as the main side game of 2027. But obviously, like I said, this timeline's not the most likely one in my opinion. But let's go over to, obviously, Gen 11. It's been 3 years again. Then, again, DLC for 1 year. And here is the point where I'm not too certain anymore. For you see, let's just reveal the next year. X and Y remakes. Because within this cycle of remakes, this cycle of main games, I could see them go for a Gen 3 remake instead of an X and Y remake. Because, otherwise, the Let's Go Hoenn games would be 11 years after Let's Go Johto, and I could very much see them, wanting to continue the Let's Go remake cycle over wanting to do remakes in the order they've previously set up they'd do them in. So this very much might be Let's Go Hoenn for the Gen 3 remakes, obviously here too. Side game, there might be a possibility if it's the X and Y remake that the next following side game would be a... we can reveal that. Would be a a Legends Zygarde, but if it is, the Legends Zygarde idea, now that I think about it, is probably even more evidence that it's probably going to be a Let's Go Hoenn game. Because whereas the Let's Go Johto, the Let's Go series would have been going on for too long, if they accompany every main remake with a Legends game, then, going from Black and White Legends to X and Y Legends would have been too short, being just, 3 years. So, now that I think about it, over here, X and Y remake's probably going to be a Let's Go Hoenn game. And then there's really not much to see. I've basically just gone 10 years into the future and predicted what everything's gonna be. And there. Gen 12, pretty obvious, 3-year cycle. DLC for 1 year. And down here, where I predicted that they're gonna do the remakes, earlier. Let's go Hoenn. But, well, that's basically it. I'm still gonna babble on about the third timeline because I kinda got curious during this video about talking about it. So, thanks for watching. Hope to see you in the next one. For anyone who's staying, let's talk about the probably lowest probability timeline of 2 release remakes within a game cycle. And okay, let's quickly, you know, fill in the gaps I've already talked about quickly. We have Black and White, probably Legends. I'm not gonna enter the Legends game in here, but Black and White, you know, if they, in this timeline, I could actually see them do the X and Y before Let's Go Hoenn Gen 3 remake, so X and remakes. Then for this year, obviously, Let's Go Hoenn. Then we have Gen 11. Obviously, the DLC I'm also not gonna enter in there because we've already gone over that too much. So, what's the next one? Oh yeah, Sun remake. You know, the more I think about it, the third timeline might actually be a bit more probable, considering that they want to make both more money, and we're going, well, getting closer to the end of the 3DS era with, you know, obviously the 3DS store is going to close down in 2023, and they probably want to get all the Pokemon from the previous games onto the main game, well, onto the newest console, so you can still continue to trade them from, you know, the older games to the newer ones, specifically the remakes. So, Sun Moon remake, then we'd had Red and Blue Remake 4, and shit, the timeline's not long enough. So yeah, Sword and Shield remake. And well, afterwards, I'm really curious if that timeline would actually go into trouble of eventually having too many games. But also, I feel like this might eventually be how they have to do it if they wanna, you know, not have the remake timeline go too far behind. But here we have Sinnoh. Oh, typo. Let's go Sinnoh. Then Gen 13. Going over to Scarlet Violet remake. And obviously this is 2032, 2033, 2034, 2035. Going over into, no idea why program's going a bit stuttery, Gold and Silver Remake 4. And, oh god, time, just gonna write it further down here, but let's get the game timeline back, because obviously, let's see, oh no, not the game timeline. I need the remake timeline. Oh, no, 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 no. Don't move. We've just gotten around to Let's Go Johto in this timeline, and as you can see, even though they're going to, well, this timeline predicts 2 remakes a cycle, it's still over 10 years behind. And obviously that's just gonna increase, considering that even though they're remaking 2 games a year, they're making 3 games. But they're not, even though they're making 2 games a cycle, which is 3 years, remaking 2 games each cycle, they're obviously, a cycle includes 3 games with the new main game. So honestly, even this wouldn't do it in the long run, because eventually they just fall back far too much. So this is kind of what I would like to see them do, just because it makes it quicker to actually get to the games that, you know, by now are pretty old. And if you look at the other timelines, there's usually, obviously there's the DLC, but let's be honest, who really is super excited for DLC for a game that should have come out, as a full game with them included? So if they switch from doing DLC to actually having the games be properly made, and then just do 2 remakes in these 2-3 year slots, I'd personally prefer that, if it weren't for the obvious problem that they're gonna decrease the overall quality of the games if they do this. And honestly, I wish they'd, hire actual studios that know what the fuck they're doing. But I've been rambling on for too long. Which of these 3 timelines do you think they're gonna go for? Which timeline would you want them to go for? And, well, hopefully this video wasn't too boring. I tried to make it exciting and have some kinda things to show, but obviously I felt like, just having game footage in the background while I talk is not going to get the point across of how I think it's going to be, as well as with this. So yeah, this video's been going on for too long. It's already the second take. Oh god. It's already 30 minutes. And the problem is the first take was 45 minutes. So that's why I decided to make a redo of it. But yeah, thanks for watching. If you stayed here until the end, I don't know, just write order into the comment section to let me know someone actually cared to listen to my crazy ramblings. And yeah, hope to see you in the next one.